What happens when a multimillionaire tech CEO, dressed in a simple tracksuit, is told she doesn't belong in the first-class line? You might think you know this story. A moment of triumph. A satisfying takedown of prejudice. You've only heard the headline. The truth is far more complicated and far more devastating. This isn't a story about a boss winning. It's a story about power pride and the catastrophic price of a single 5-minute decision. A decision that created a viral storm, shattered a corporate empire, and proved that karma has a very, very long memory. Stay with me as we uncover the full shocking story of Dr. Evelyn Reed. Dr. Evelyn Reed, CEO of Auratech Innovations, believed in efficiency above all else. It was the principle upon which she'd built her $4.2 billion company, a titan in the world of predictive analytics and AI integration. Efficiency was why she was standing in the priority boarding line for Stellara Airlines Flight 812 from New York's JFK to London Heathrow at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. She had a 9 a.m. breakfast meeting in Mayfair to close the largest acquisition in her company's history, a deal that would cement her legacy. Efficiency was also why she was dressed not in a tailored suit, but in a bespoke charcoal-grey cashmere tracksuit by Loro Piana, a pair of pristine, white common project sneakers on her feet. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, elegant bun, and she wore no makeup. To the undiscerning eye, she was just another comfortable traveler. To the discerning eye, her quiet confidence and the platinum band of her Patek Philippe watch hinted at something more. But in the fluorescent, impersonal chaos of Terminal 4 discernment was in short supply. The line moved forward. Evelyn held her phone, the first-class boarding pass, glowing on its screen. In front of her, a man in a rumpled suit who reeked of duty-free cologne was waved through with a practiced smile. Now it was her turn. She stepped up to the podium, offering her phone to the gate agent. The agent, whose name tag read Karen Miller, looked up. Her eyes, tired and etched with the permanent skepticism of a long-serving airline employee, flickered from Evelyn's face down to her tracksuit and back up again. She didn't look at the phone screen. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Karen said, her voice a monotone of rehearsed authority. "This is the priority line for first class and Diamond Medallion members only." Evelyn blinked. She lowered her phone slightly. "I know. I'm in seat 1A. Karen's lips formed a thin, tight line that was meant to be a smile, but looked more like a pained grimace. "The general boarding call will be in approximately 15 minutes. If you could please step to the side." She gestured vaguely towards the sea of waiting passengers in Zone 3. A small, hot prickle of annoyance touched Evelyn's neck. This was not the first time. The assumptions, the subtle dismissals, they were the background noise of her life, the static she'd learned to tune out. But tonight, with the Helios Dynamics deal hanging in the balance, her patience was a finite resource. "Perhaps you should look at the ticket," Evelyn suggested, her voice calm and even. She pushed the phone forward again. "Seat 1A, Dr. Evelyn Reed." Karen Miller pointedly ignored the screen. It was a power play, subtle but unmistakable. She was the gatekeeper. She held the keys to this tiny kingdom of aluminum and plexiglass. "Ma'am, we have a process here. Everyone in this line has already been pre-vetted. I'm going to have to ask you to step aside so I can board the other passengers." The man behind Evelyn, a portly executive in a shiny suit, huffed impatiently. "Come on, lady. Some of us have planes to catch." The humiliation was a familiar, bitter taste. It wasn't just about the line. It was about the public questioning of her belonging. It was the silent accusation that she was an imposter. For a woman who had built an empire from scratch, who had fought her way into boardrooms where no one looked like her, this was a wound that never quite scarred over. I am a first-class passenger, Evelyn stated, her voice losing its gentle edge and gaining a shard of steel. Scan the ticket. Now. Karen's eyes narrowed. She saw not a CEO, not a paying customer, but a challenge to her authority. Ma'am, your tone is not appreciated. I'm the lead agent here, and if you can't produce the appropriate credentials, I will call security. The credentials are on the phone. You refuse to look at. Evelyn's voice rose and several heads turned. The hot prickle of annoyance was now a simmering fire. That's enough, Karen. A new voicemail and Weedy joined the fray. A supervisor, Liam Vance, scurried over his tie askew. He had the harried look of a man perpetually putting out fires he'd had no hand in starting. What's the problem here? Karen turned to him, her expression a mask of beleaguered professionalism. This woman is refusing to leave the priority line, Liam. She's holding everyone up and claims to have a first-class ticket, but she won't show it to me. It was a blatant lie so audacious that it momentarily stunned Evelyn into silence. She was holding the ticket right in front of the woman's face. Liam Vance turned to Evelyn, not with an intent to solve the problem, but with an air of profound weariness, as if she were the last and most tedious obstacle in his very long day. Ma'am, let's not make a scene. If you're not in first class, you need to move. It's that simple. For the last time, Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level I am in. Seat 1A. My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed. Your agent is the one refusing to do her job. Liam glanced at Karen, who gave a subtle shake of her head. He trusted his employee. It was easier. He turned back to Evelyn. Look, I don't know what to tell you. If you want to file a complaint later, you can do that. But right now, you are disrupting the boarding process. Step aside or I'll have Port Authority escort you from the gate. The threat hung in the air thick and ugly. All around them, passengers were watching, some with sympathy, most with detached amusement. The scene was set: the entitled woman in the tracksuit versus the hard-working airline staff. Evelyn knew how this looked. She also knew she was at a crossroads. She could swallow her pride retreat into the crowd and board with Zone 3 seething in silent fury for the entire 7-hour flight. Or she could remind them who she was. She had built her entire life on never ever backing down. You don't want to do that, Liam, she said softly. She took a slow, deliberate breath, the fire in her chest cooling into something much harder and more dangerous ice. She pulled out her wallet, but not for ID. She retrieved a sleek black business card. Auratech Innovations, Dr. Evelyn Reed, President and CEO. She held it out. Liam glanced at it, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Auratech. What's this Auratech? Evelyn explained, as if to a child, is the company that, as of 9 a.m. yesterday, signed an exclusive 5-year, $80 million corporate travel contract with Stellara Airlines. A contract that makes my company your airline's single largest corporate client in North America. Liam's face paled. Karen's smug expression faltered, replaced by a dawning horror. Evelyn wasn't finished. This contract was personally negotiated by myself and your Executive Vice President of North American Operations, a man I believe you know, James Harrington. She unlocked her phone, not to show the boarding pass, but to scroll through her contacts. I have James on speed dial. I suggest you scan my ticket before I call him and inform him that his premier client was threatened and denied boarding by his staff at JFK. I wonder what he'll have to say about that. The silence that followed was absolute. The huffing executive behind her was now staring, mouth agape. Liam Vance looked as if he was about to be physically ill. Karen Miller stood frozen, the color draining from her face, her eyes finally belatedly fixed on the glowing screen of Evelyn's phone. It read, Reed Evelyn, Seat 1A. The shift in the atmosphere at gate B23 was palpable. It was as if a switch had been flipped, plunging the brightly lit space into a cold, suffocating darkness. The air, once filled with the impatient energy of travel, was now thick with a dawning collective dread. Liam Vance, the supervisor, stared at the business card in his hand as if it were a venomous snake. The name James Harrington was not just a name. It was a spectre that haunted every quarterly performance review and every memo about budget cuts. Harrington was the overlord of their entire operational world. Karen Miller's professional facade, so rigidly maintained just moments before, began to crumble. Her practiced composure dissolved into a raw, undisguised panic. Her gaze darted from Evelyn's impassive face to Liam's ashen. One seeking an escape route that no longer existed. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been inverted with the force of a tectonic plate. I don't understand. Liam stammered, his voice barely a whisper. He looked at the business card again, then at Evelyn's simple attire, his brain failing to reconcile the two realities. This has to be some kind of mistake. The only mistake, Evelyn said, her voice a blade of polished ice, was your assumption that a black woman in a tracksuit couldn't possibly belong in first class. The second mistake was your complete and utter failure to perform the most basic function of your job, scanning a ticket. She took a step closer to the podium, her presence suddenly immense. The other passengers in the priority line, who had been a source of pressure and judgment, now shrank back, their expressions a mixture of awe and fear. They were no longer witnessing a simple dispute. They were watching a public execution. A younger gate agent, Ben Carter, who had been quietly processing passengers at the adjacent counter, froze mid-scan. He had seen the whole thing. He'd seen Corin's dismissive wave, heard her condescending tone. He'd felt that familiar, uncomfortable lurch in his gut that told him this was wrong, but like so many times before, he had stayed silent, paralyzed by the hierarchy and the fear of getting involved. Now regret was a cold stone in his stomach. Karen finally found her voice, though it was choked and thin. I was just following procedure. She pleaded, her eyes wide and desperate. We're trained to be cautious. People try to scam their way on all the time. Was I trying to scam you? Evelyn asked, her voice deceptively soft. Or was my appearance simply not up to your standards for SIAT 1? Tell me, Karen, what is the procedure for profiling a passenger based on their clothes and skin color? Is that in the Stellara employee handbook? Karen flinched as if struck. No, it wasn't about that. I got flustered. You were being aggressive. The lie was so pathetic, so transparent, that a low murmur rippled through the onlookers. Evelyn let the accusation hang in the air, its absurdity, a testament to the hole Karen was digging for herself. I was aggressive, Evelyn repeated, her voice flat. I asked you to do your job. You refused. I asked you again. You refused, and then you lied to your supervisor. And you, she said, her gaze shifting to Liam, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. You didn't investigate. You didn't ask to see the ticket. You simply took her word for it and threatened to call security on me. On your airline's single most valuable client. She let that sink in. The weight of the $80 million figure seemed to suck the very oxygen from the air. It was an astronomical sum, an amount that could pay their salaries for 1,000 lifetimes. Evelyn raised her phone. Her thumb hovered over James Harrington's contact. So here we are, Liam. Karen. You have one final chance to tell me why I shouldn't make this call. Why I shouldn't tell James that the culture at this station is so broken, so deeply poisoned by prejudice and incompetence that his premium customers are harassed at the gate. Liam's professional training finally kicked in, however feebly. He snapped into a posture of groveling appeasement. "Dr. Reed, please. There is no need for that. On behalf of Stellara Airlines, I apologize. Profusely. It was a misunderstanding. A terrible, terrible misunderstanding." He snatched Evelyn's phone, his hands trembling, and scanned the boarding pass himself. The machine beeped its cheerful final confirmation. "Beep." "There," he said with a pathetic attempt at a smile. "See, all sorted. Please accept our apologies. Let us escort you onto the plane. We can get you a glass of champagne." But Evelyn didn't move. She looked from his desperate face to Karen's terrified one. She saw not just two employees who had made a mistake, but a symptom of a disease she had been fighting her entire life. It was the casual dismissal, the reflexive disbelief, the lazy comfort of prejudice. An apology felt like a flimsy bandage on a festering wound. It wasn't enough. Not this time. She knew what people would say. They would call her arrogant, a bully. They would say she was using her power to crush the little people. But from her vantage point, they were not the little people. In that moment at that gate, they had held all the power, and they had wielded it against her without a second thought. What was the point of accumulating all this influence, all this success, if not to recalibrate the scales when they were so flagrantly tipped against you? "It's too late for apologies, Liam," she said. She put her business card away and tapped her phone screen. The call connected. Evelyn, a cheerful voice, boomed from the speaker. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Calling to rub it in about the Helios deal. I saw the press release." "Congratulations." Evelyn kept her eyes locked on Liam and Karen. "James, I'm at JFK, gate B23, standing in front of your lead agent Karen Miller and her supervisor, Liam Vance." The cheerful tone on the other end vanished. "Is there a problem?" "There is," Evelyn said, her voice resonating through the silent gate area. "A few minutes ago, your team refused to let me board. They profiled me, accused me of lying, and threatened to have me removed by security, all while my first-class ticket was in my hand. They have caused a significant public disturbance and have represented the Stellara brand in the most unprofessional and insulting way imaginable. A string of curses could be heard from the phone's speaker. Evelyn, I am so sorry. Put the supervisor on the phone. Right now." Evelyn held the phone out to Liam. His hand shook so violently he could barely take it. He lifted it to his ear, his face the color of chalk. "This is Vance," he whispered. The gate area was so quiet that everyone could hear James Harrington's voice, tinny and distorted by the phone, but radiating a fury that was clear as day. "Vance, you have two choices. You can either listen to me very carefully, or you can start packing your desk. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Liam croaked. "Dr. Reed is our premier client. Her company's contract is the single biggest deal our airline has signed in a decade. Your team's conduct has not only insulted her personally, it has put that entire contract in jeopardy. It is an act of catastrophic incompetence." There was a pause. "I want a full report on my desk in an hour. But that's a formality. As of this moment, consider your employment and that of Agent Miller terminated, effective immediately." Karen let out a small, strangled gasp. Liam's face crumpled. "Sir, with all due respect, it was a mistake. We can fix this." "There is no fixing this," Harrington roared. "You will be escorted from the premises. Your final paychecks will be mailed to you. Do not contact anyone at this company again." "Are my instructions clear?" Liam stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear. "But my career? 20 years. Should have taught you better," Harrington snapped. "Now give the phone back to Dr. Reed." Liam numbly handed the phone back. Evelyn took it, her expression unreadable. "James," she said. There was a third agent here, a younger man, Ben Carter. She glanced at the young man who was watching the scene unfold with wide, horrified eyes. He was silent. He did nothing. There was a brief pause on the line. The entire team at that gate is a liability. It's a cancer. You cut it out. All of it. Carter is gone, too. We'll staff the flight from another gate. Evelyn nodded slowly. Thank you, James. I appreciate your swift action. Whatever you need, Evelyn. Anything. I'm mortified. I'll see you in London, she said, and ended the call. She looked at the three of them. Liam Vance, a man whose 20-year career had just evaporated. Karen Miller, whose face was now streaked with tears, a portrait of disbelief and despair. And Ben Carter, the silent bystander, who simply looked confused, a casualty of a war he hadn't even realized he was fighting. Without another word, Evelyn Reed turned, walked down the jet bridge and onto the plane. She left behind the wreckage of 3 careers, a stunned crowd of passengers, and the chilling silence of absolute power, perfectly executed. She felt a grim, cold satisfaction. Justice, she thought, had been served. Swiftly, efficiently. Stepping from the jet bridge into the hushed, climate-controlled sanctuary of the Stellara Airlines first-class cabin was like crossing into another dimension. The chaotic energy of the gate, the raw, ugly emotions she had just unleashed, all of it, dissolved behind the soft, closing cabin door. A flight attendant with a practiced, serene smile greeted her. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Reed. May I take your coat? A glass of Dom Perignon before we depart. Thank you, I'd love one," Evelyn replied, her voice smooth and steady, betraying none of the turmoil of the past 10 minutes. She settled into seat 1A, a private suite with a lie-flat bed, a personal minibar, and a 24-inch screen. The supple leather of the seat conformed to her body. This was her world, a world of comfort, privilege, and order, a world she had meticulously built for herself. The incident at the gate felt like a contamination, a brief but jarring intrusion of the messy, prejudiced world she thought she had transcended. As the champagne flute was placed in her hand, its contents fizzing with tiny celebratory bubbles, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. The cold satisfaction she'd felt at the gate was still there, but it was now mingling with something else, something less triumphant. It was the familiar exhaustion of the fight. Why did it always have to be a fight? Why, after all her achievements, did she still have to prove she belonged? She looked out the small porthole window at the frantic activity on the tarmac. The ground crew, a swarm of anonymous figures in high-visibility vests, moved with purpose. They were part of a complex, interconnected system, just like the gate agents. Karen, Liam, Ben. They were cogs in a machine. Had she just broken 3 cogs, or had she sent a necessary shockwave through the entire system? Her phone buzzed. It was a text from David Brown, her COO and closest confidant. David heard there was some trouble at JFK. James Harrington's office called ours in a panic. "You okay?" Evelyn typed a quick reply. "Evelyn, all handled. Minor issue with incompetent staff. They're no longer employed." The response came back almost instantly. "David, okay. Talk when you land. Focus on Helios. That's all that matters." She put the phone away. David was right. The Helios Dynamics acquisition was everything. It was a $1.2 billion deal that would absorb a rival and give Auratech a near monopoly on AI-driven logistical solutions for the global shipping industry. It was her magnum opus, the deal that would elevate her from a mere tech CEO to a genuine industry titan, mentioned in the same breath as people like Tim Cook and Satya Nadella. The CEO of Helios, Marcus Thorne, was an old-school corporate leader. He was 65, deeply principled, and believed that a company's culture was its most valuable asset. He had been hesitant to sell, but Evelyn had spent 6 months personally charming him, proving Auratech's superior technology, and more importantly, its vision. He had finally agreed, contingent on a final breakfast meeting in London, to sign the papers. The deal was built on a foundation of mutual professional respect. The plane began its pushback from the gate, the low rumble of the engines a comforting vibration. Evelyn closed her eyes, trying to purge the image of Karen Miller's tear-streaked face from her mind. It was an unpleasant image, but sentimentality was a luxury she couldn't afford. In the corporate world, you were either a shark or you were chum. Weakness was blood in the water. She had shown strength. James Harrington had responded accordingly. The system had worked. But as the plane taxied towards the runway, a new sound intruded on her thoughts. A passenger 2 rows behind her was speaking loudly on his phone. "You will not believe what just happened at the gate. This woman, a black lady in a tracksuit, got into it with the gate agent. Total Karen moment from the airline staff." Yeah, a real mess. Then plot twist, turns out she's some big shot CEO. Yes, she got the entire team fired. On the spot, I got the whole thing on video. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Her head snapped around. A man in his late 30s with trendy glasses and an expensive-looking watch was grinning into his phone, recounting the story with the breathless excitement of a gossip columnist. He was the huffing executive who had been behind her in line. Yeah, her name is Evelyn Reed or something. CIO of some tech company. The look on their faces when she got the airline VP on the phone. Priceless. I'm telling you, this is going to be all over Twitter by the time we land. I'll send you the clip. The cold satisfaction that had sustained her now evaporated, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated dread. It wasn't a contained incident anymore. It was a story, a narrative, and she was no longer in control of it. For the next 7 hours, trapped in a gilded cage at 35,000 feet, Evelyn was powerless. She paid for the in-flight Wi-Fi, her fingers flying across her phone's keyboard. The man's name, according to his LinkedIn profile, which she quickly found, was Richard Sterling, a mid-level venture capitalist. His Twitter feed was already active. He had posted the video. It was a 90-second clip filmed from a low angle. It started mid-confrontation. It captured her raised voice saying, "Scan the ticket. Now." It captured Liam's weak-willed intervention. It captured her cold, precise dismantling of their authority. And it captured in crystal-clear audio her phone call with James Harrington and the subsequent firing of 3 people. The video was titled, "CEO Karen Gets JFK Airline Staff Fired for Doing Their Jobs. Abuse of Power or Righteous Justice." You decide Harshatra Corporate Karen, JFK-Stellar Airlines, Kars Evelyn Reed. By the time they were over the Atlantic, the video had 50,000 views. By the time they began their descent into Heathrow, it had over 1 million. The comment section was a war zone. Yes, Queen, this is what happens when you mess with a real boss. So a rich CEO in a $2,000 tracksuit can just get working people fired. This is disgusting. I'm cancelling my Stellara flight. They profiled her. Period. She had every right. Don't start while none won't be none. This isn't justice. This is a temper tantrum with consequences. She didn't have to get them all fired. The young guy did nothing. Her name is Dr. Evelyn Reed, CEO of Auratech, a self-made black woman in tech. Of course they questioned her. This is what racism looks like in 2025. Auratech, the data mining company, figures. Soulless corporation, run by a soulless CEO. Cancelling my account. The narrative was splitting, fracturing into 1,000 different interpretations. She was a hero of racial justice. She was a villain of corporate overreach. She was an icon of female empowerment. She was a monster of unchecked privilege. Evelyn felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with turbulence. She had spent a decade carefully crafting her public image, the brilliant innovator, the tough but fair leader, the philanthropist. In the span of a single transatlantic flight, that image had been hijacked and twisted into a dozen different caricatures, none of which she controlled. As the plane touched down at Heathrow, her phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Emails from her PR team, texts from her board members, missed calls from David. One headline from a push notification stood out: fired Stellara agent Karen Miller to appear on Good Morning America for exclusive interview. Evelyn leaned her head back against the leather, the taste of champagne having long since turned to ash in her mouth. She had won the battle at the gate. But as the London morning light streamed through her window, she had the sinking feeling that she was about to lose the war. And the prize was the very empire she had built. The 24 hours after Evelyn landed in London were a masterclass in modern corporate crisis management. Or more accurately, a desperate attempt to contain a wildfire with a squirt gun. While Evelyn was in her car speeding towards the Connaught Hotel, her PR team, led by the unflappable Jessica Finch, was already in damage control mode. The hashtag Ajaccio Corporate Karen was trending worldwide. So was Do We Stand with Evelyn. The internet, in its infinite and chaotic wisdom, had chosen its champions. The video, now with over 15 million views, was being dissected on every news channel. Pundits debated the intersection of race, class, and power. Body language experts analyzed her posture. Amateur sleuths had already dug up the home addresses of Karen Miller and Liam Vance. The story had taken on a life of its own, a monstrous, self-perpetuating entity, fueled by clicks and outrage. Oratex stock, which had been trading at an all-time high in anticipation of the Helios deal, dipped 4% in pre-market trading. It wasn't a catastrophe, but it was a tremor, a warning of the instability beneath the surface. The first major blow came at 7 a.m. London time, which was 2 a.m. in New York. Karen Miller, flanked by a pro bono lawyer who specialized in high-profile wrongful termination cases, appeared on Good Morning America. She looked nothing like the stern gate agent from the airport. She was dressed in a soft pastel sweater. She was soft-spoken, contrite, and expertly coached. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice trembling as she dabbed a tear from her eye. "I was at the end of a 14-hour double shift. My son has cystic fibrosis, and I was waiting on a call from his doctor. I was stressed, I was distracted, and I made a judgment call that was wrong. But I am not a racist. I was following procedures that are drilled into us to prevent security breaches." She painted a picture of a hard-working single mother struggling to make ends meet, pitted against an untouchable billionaire who could destroy a person's life with a single phone call. She conveniently omitted the part where she had lied to her supervisor. She spoke of Ben Carter, the young agent who was fired alongside her. "Ben, he's just 22 years old," she wept. "It was his first real job. He was saving up for his wedding. He did absolutely nothing, and he lost his job too. All because I made a mistake, and Dr. Reed decided to punish everyone." The performance was devastatingly effective. The narrative shifted. Evelyn was no longer just a powerful woman standing up to prejudice. She was a cruel executioner who had taken out 2 innocent bystanders along with her intended target. A GoFundMe page for the fired Stellara 3 was launched. Within hours, it had raised over $100,000. Evelyn watched the interview from her hotel suite, a feeling of cold fury mixing with a dawning sense of helplessness. "She's lying," she said to the empty room. "She's a manipulative, prejudicial liar." But it didn't matter. Karen Miller had seized control of the story, framing it as a David versus Goliath struggle. And in that telling, Evelyn was unequivocally Goliath. Her 9 a.m. breakfast with Marcus Thorne was looming. Her phone rang. It was David. "Cancel the meeting," he said, his voice strained. There was no preamble. "What no, David? I can handle Marcus. I'll explain what happened." "You don't get it," David said, and the use of her nickname told her how serious this was. Marcus Thorne's world is built on honor, reputation, and stability. Our stock is jittery, and the media is painting you as a volatile, vindictive tyrant. The optics are a disaster. We need to get ahead of this before you walk into that room. Get ahead of it how she snapped. By letting them win. By letting that woman's crocodile tears define me. By showing some humility, David's voice rose a rare occurrence. Issue a statement. Apologize for the collateral damage. Announce that Auratech will offer a severance package to the 2 agents who weren't directly involved. Show that you have some contrition. Contrition for what? For being racially profiled. For demanding to be treated with the respect I'm owed. I will not apologize for that. Then you will lose this deal, David said flatly. Marcus Thorne is from a generation that believes how you do anything is how you do everything. He's looking at this, and he's not seeing a woman fighting for justice. He's seeing a leader who, when faced with a minor obstacle, opts for the nuclear option. He's seeing someone who creates chaos instead of resolving it. That is not a person he will sell his company to. A heavy silence fell between them. Evelyn stared out at the grey London skyline. Every instinct, every fibre of her being that had been forged in the crucible of corporate and social warfare screamed at her not to back down, not to apologize, not to show weakness. But David's words had the chilling ring of truth. His office called. David continued, his voice softer now. They want to postpone the signing. They're monitoring the situation. That's code for, we're looking for the exit. You have one chance to fix this, Evelyn. The weight of it all settled on her. The $80 million airline contract, the billion-dollar acquisition, her legacy. All of it was balanced on the knife's edge of public perception, threatened by a 5-minute altercation that had spiraled into a global news event. Okay, she finally whispered. Draft a statement. Run it by legal. We'll talk about severance for the other 2. But I am not apologizing to her. It's a start, David said, relief evident in his voice. Now go to that breakfast. Don't mention the incident unless he does. Just be the brilliant, charming CEO he agreed to sell to. Remind him why he made this deal in the first place. Evelyn hung up the phone, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at her reflection in the dark screen. The confident, powerful woman who had boarded the plane in New York seemed like a distant memory. In her place was someone trapped, someone whose power had suddenly become a liability. She had always believed that power was a shield. It protected you, it insulated you. But now she was discovering the terrible paradox of her success. The higher she climbed, the more visible she became, and the more she had to lose. Her power hadn't just been a shield, it had been a spotlight, and now it was illuminating her in the harshest, most unforgiving light imaginable. And a man named Marcus Thorne was sitting in judgment, holding the future of her empire in his hands. The breakfast was set in a private dining room at Claridge's, a bastion of old-world English elegance. The table was impeccably laid with starched white linen, gleaming silver, and delicate porcelain. It was a civilized, tranquil setting, a world away from the digital battlefield, where Evelyn's reputation was being torn to shreds. Marcus Thorne was already seated when she arrived. He rose to greet her, a tall, impeccably dressed man with silver hair and a kind, discerning face. He had the calm, steady presence of someone who had weathered countless market crashes, hostile takeovers, and corporate crises. He was, in a word, unflappable. "Evelyn," he said, his handshake firm and dry. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." "Marcus." "It's good to see you," she replied, forcing a smile that felt brittle. They ordered coffee and made small talk about the flight, the weather, the dreary predictability of English cuisine. It was all a carefully choreographed dance, a prelude to the conversation that they both knew was coming. Evelyn followed David's advice, keeping her tone light, focusing on their shared vision for the merged companies, the technological synergies, the future they were about to build together. Marcus listened patiently, his eyes never leaving her face. He was an astute reader of people, a skill honed over 40 years in business. He wasn't just listening to her words. He was assessing her state of mind, her composure, her character under fire. Finally, as the waiter cleared their plates, he leaned back in his chair, folding his hands on the table. "Evelyn," he began, his voice gentle but firm. "We need to address the elephant in the room. I've seen the video. I've read the news reports. My board has been calling me all morning." Evelyn took a deep breath. "Marcus, it was a deeply unpleasant situation that has been sensationalized and taken out of context." "Perhaps," he conceded, "but context is often a luxury in these matters. What I saw, what my board saw, was a leader who, when provoked, responded with overwhelming and disproportionate force. I was racially profiled and publicly humiliated," she countered, her voice hardening slightly. "The agent lied to her superior. The superior threatened me without a moment's investigation. It was a systemic failure of professionalism and respect. The response was entirely proportionate to the insult and the potential damage to your future partner's reputation." Marcus held up a hand. "I am not for 1 second defending the actions of the airline staff. What they did was inexcusable, and a clear example of the kind of implicit bias that is a cancer in our society. You had every right to be angry. You had every right to demand an apology and to file a formal complaint that would, I am sure, have resulted in their suspension and retraining, if not termination." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But that is not what you did," he continued. "You didn't seek to correct the behavior. You sought to annihilate the individuals. You used the immense leverage of an $80 million contract to have 3 people fired on the spot in a public forum via a speakerphone, one of whom, by all accounts, was simply a bystander. It was not a demonstration of justice, Evelyn. It was a demonstration of dominance." Evelyn felt a flash of indignation. It was a demonstration of consequences. Was it, Marcus asked, his gaze unwavering, or was it an act of pride? "At Helios, we have a simple ethos. We build things. We solve problems. We don't break people. The leader of our company, the person to whom I would be entrusting my life's work, must be a builder, a problem solver." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "What I saw in that video was a destroyer. I saw someone who, when faced with a broken system, chose to break the people within it rather than fix the system itself. What happens in 3 years when a senior engineer at Helios makes a costly mistake? What happens when a division underperforms? Will you seek to understand, to mentor, to rebuild? Or will you simply eliminate the problem? My people, my legacy, deserve a builder, not a destroyer." The words struck her with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't judging her for being a powerful woman or a black woman. He was judging her for her actions, purely and simply through the lens of his own deeply held principles of leadership. He had looked at the same set of facts and seen not a righteous victory, but a profound failure of character. "The deal, Marcus," she began, her voice strained. "This has nothing to do with how I run my company or how I would integrate Helios." "It has everything to do with it," he said sadly. "It is a window into your soul, and I must confess, I am troubled by what I see." At that moment, Evelyn's phone, which she'd placed face down on the table, began to vibrate. Then it vibrated again and again, buzzing insistently against the polished wood. She ignored it, her full attention fixed on the man who held her future in his hands. Marcus, however, glanced at the phone. "Perhaps you should take that. It seems urgent." With a sense of dread, Evelyn flipped the phone over. The screen was filled with notifications. The top one was from the Auratech board's private group chat. The message was from her chairman, a stoic former general named Robert Maxwell. "Robert Evelyn. A new video has just been released. You need to see this immediately." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She tapped the link. It led to a news article from a major media outlet. The headline read, "New angle emerges in Stellara firing security footage. Shows CEO initiated contact escalated confrontation." The article contained the official, silent, wide-angle security footage from the gate. It showed everything without the biased framing of Richard Sterling's phone. It showed her stepping up to the podium. It showed Karen's dismissive wave. But it also showed Evelyn stepping closer, pointing her body language visibly aggressive, long before Liam Vance arrived. Crucially, it showed the young agent Ben Carter, looking over with a worried expression and appearing to say something to Karen, who waved him off. He had tried to intervene. He hadn't been a silent bystander. He had been silenced. The article was accompanied by a statement from Ben Carter's new lawyer. It claimed he had tried to tell Karen Miller to just scan the ticket, but she had ignored him, and that he was a victim of both his manager's prejudice and Dr. Reed's indiscriminate revenge. He was now suing both Stellara Airlines and Dr. Evelyn Reed personally for wrongful termination and defamation. It was a checkmate. The narrative was no longer debatable. The security footage, cold and objective, painted her as the aggressor and Ben Carter as an innocent, martyred hero. Her PR statement, her carefully crafted defenses, they were all worthless now. She slowly placed the phone back down on the table. The color had drained from her face. Marcus Thorne looked at her. His expression, not of anger, but of deep, profound pity. He had seen the headline. He didn't need to see the video. "I think," he said softly, standing up and placing his napkin on the table, "that this conversation is over. I'm truly sorry, Evelyn. I wish you the best in resolving your current difficulties." He nodded once, a gesture of finality, and walked out of the room, leaving Evelyn Reed utterly alone in the silent, elegant room with the ruins of her billion-dollar deal, her shattered reputation, and the relentless, buzzing judgment of her phone. The karma wasn't just knocking at the door. It had kicked the door down and was now sitting at her table. The fallout from the security video was not a shockwave. It was an extinction-level event. The ambiguity that had allowed for debate was gone, replaced by the cold, silent, objective truth of the wide-angle camera. The story was now simple and brutal. A powerful CEO had been the aggressor, and in her rage she had steamrolled the career of a young man who had tried to do the right thing. Ben Carter, represented by a savvy lawyer, became an overnight symbol of quiet integrity, filing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against both Stellara and Evelyn personally. Auratech's board didn't wait. The call from her chairman, General Robert Maxwell, came before she had even processed the full scope of the disaster. His voice was like ice cracking. "Evelyn, the Helios deal is dead. Marcus Thorne has formally withdrawn, citing a fundamental divergence in leadership philosophy. The stock is in freefall. This isn't a PR crisis anymore. It's a mortal threat to this company. Your company. Evelyn sat in the suffocating silence of her hotel room. What do you want me to do, Robert? It's no longer about what you do. Maxwell stated, his tone devoid of sympathy. The board has voted. We are issuing a formal apology to Ben Carter, offering him a settlement and a position at Auratech, which his lawyer will certainly have him refuse to make him look even better. And you will be taking a mandatory, indefinite leave of absence, effective immediately. David Brown is now interim CEO. The words hung in the air, a corporate death sentence. You're firing me. We're saving the company from the mess you created, Maxwell corrected her, and the line went dead. In the span of 48 hours, she had lost the deal of a lifetime, her reputation, and now her own company. A week later, back in her sterile New York apartment, a ghost in her own life, David Brown came to visit. He didn't offer comfort or condolences. He poured 2 glasses of scotch and delivered the final, most necessary blow. The board is going to ask for your official resignation, he said, his voice heavy with the exhaustion of a decade of friendship, meeting a brutal reality. They'll give you a golden parachute that will make you royalty. You'll never have to work again. I don't want to be royalty, David, she whispered, her voice cracking. I want my company. You saw the company as an extension of yourself, David replied, his gaze unsparingly honest. That was always your strength and your greatest weakness. You couldn't separate a personal insult from a corporate liability. What happened at that gate wasn't about business. It was about all the armor you've had to wear for 20 years. The 1,000 little cuts, the assumptions, the dismissals. That gate agent didn't just insult a CEO. She poked at the raw nerve of every single slight you've ever endured. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. Your reaction wasn't a power play. It was a primal scream of frustration amplified by the megaphone of your power. You weren't trying to solve a problem. You were trying to win a war that only existed in your own head. And you burned your whole kingdom down in the process. His words were a mirror reflecting a truth she could no longer deny. The karma wasn't losing the deal or the company. The true karma was this being stripped of everything that defined her, forced to confront the angry, wounded person she had become. The power was gone. All that was left was Evelyn Reed, and she had no idea who that was. Months later, Evelyn officially resigned. The world, as it always does, moved on. Auratech stabilized under David's leadership. Evelyn, flush with more money than she could ever spend, traveled seeking a distraction that never came. She was adrift in a sea of luxurious numbness. The change began with a small article she read in a quiet cafe. It detailed a new mandatory de-escalation and implicit bias training program at Stellara Airlines, inspired by a high-profile incident last year. The airline's CEO was quoted saying, "We learned that you don't just punish mistakes. You invest in preventing them." They had learned. They had fixed the system. She had only broken the people. The thought, for the first time, was not a source of bitterness, but of clarity. She returned to New York and began the quiet work of rebuilding herself, not her empire. She started volunteering at a center that mentored young women of color in business. She shared her stories, not just of her meteoric rise, but of her catastrophic fall. She spoke of pride, of anger, and of how the greatest challenge is not in conquering others, but in mastering oneself. One afternoon, she was flying to Chicago. She'd booked a standard economy ticket. Standing in the general boarding line, she felt a strange peace. She was just another traveler. At the gate, an irate man was yelling at a young, flustered agent about his oversized bag. "Do you know who I am?" the man bellowed. "I'm a platinum member." The old Evelyn would have seethed at the delay and judged them both. The new Evelyn stepped forward. She didn't confront the man. She spoke gently to the agent. "You're doing a great job," she said softly. "Take a breath. You're in control." The agent's shoulders straightened. The simple validation was enough. Evelyn then turned to the man, her tone disarmingly calm. "Sir, she's just doing her job. Why not let her check the bag for you? It'll be waiting on the jet bridge when we land." No harm done. The man, caught off guard by her non-confrontational approach, grumbled, but complied. The crisis evaporated. As Evelyn handed her boarding pass to the agent, the young woman gave her a look of profound gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know," Evelyn said with a small, genuine smile. "You handled it." She walked down the jet bridge and found her middle seat in row 28. It was cramped, a universe away from the private suite of seat 1A. But as the plane took off, soaring into the sky, Evelyn Reed felt something she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the thrill of power or the cold satisfaction of victory. It was something quieter, deeper. It felt like grace. She had lost an empire, but she had finally found her way back to the ground. So was it karma, or was it just the inevitable consequence of a life lived at high velocity, where power obscured humanity? The story of Evelyn Reed isn't just about a dramatic firing at an airport. It's a powerful lesson about how the very things we build to protect ourselves, wealth, status, and authority, can become our most luxurious prisons. She won the battle but lost her kingdom, only to find herself in the wreckage. Her story forces us to ask, what is the true measure of strength? Is it the power to tear things down, or the grace to build them up, starting with ourselves? The line between justice and revenge, between confidence and pride, is razor thin. Evelyn Reed walked it, fell from it, and ultimately had to learn to walk it all over again. What do you think? Was her initial action justified? Did the punishment fit the crime for her or for the airline staff? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories like this, that go beyond the headlines, are what you're here for, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into stories you only thought you knew.